Well, thank you so very much for having me today. I am truly honored to be here speaking to you all. When you're asked to speak on a topic like using your words for good and positive things, you become very quickly and very acutely aware of just how bad you are at it sometimes. And that's what happened to me. The Lord has given me many opportunities. And just side note, don't you love that word, opportunities? It makes everything sound so positive, doesn't it? Like you can take anything that you would call a challenge normally and start calling it an opportunity, and suddenly the whole world shifts. It all becomes so positive and so awesome, and now you have all these opportunities to take advantage of. And that's what the Lord has done for me over the last couple of months. He's given me many opportunities to become very aware of how I use my words. So I want to stand here today and tell you, I do not have this figured out. I wish I did. I wish that I could stand here and say, you know what, I have learned the secret to only ever using my words for good and positive things. But the truth is, that's just not the case. But I have learned some things along the way. The Lord continues to teach me some things that I am very happy to share with you all today. But really, this is not a topic that any of us have figured out, is it? How to use our words for good all the time. And we're going to see why when we look at the Bible here in just a couple of minutes. But here's the good news. God loves us. He's gracious. He's patient with us as we learn. And so we're going to learn a couple of things together today. Before we dive in, though, there's two really important foundations that we need to lay before we can move on. The first one is the importance of truth, and the second one is the weight of our words. So let's start with truth, because that's a really important one, isn't it? When we know the truth, we can anchor ourselves in it and measure everything else by it. So think of a compass. If you know true north, you can find your way anywhere, unless you're me. I cannot use north, south, east, and west to go anywhere. I couldn't find my way out of a cardboard box with that. It's just not the way my brain works. So I let Google Maps do all the work for me. But even there, the truth still matters, doesn't it? Because if Google Maps tells me the truth about where I am, well, then I can get where I'm going. But if it doesn't, I end up lost. And I mean really hopelessly lost. I am absolutely lost. And the same kind of goes for life. If we don't know, or we don't want to face the truth, things can go really sideways fast, can't they? And sometimes we don't really want to know the truth, do we? Because we think it's not going to serve us very well. So we kind of like set it aside over here and ignore it. Or maybe we start like deceiving ourselves about the truth a little bit. And that's something I know a little bit about. So I'm going to give you an example in my life. Several years back, I wanted to lose weight, as one does. And so I figured out I've got to have a calorie deficit. I did all the math behind it. I downloaded that little app where you could track your food and your calories and everything, and I set out to lose my weight. But now, in the beginning, I had a really hard time cutting back on my food because I love food. I don't want anybody taking my food away from me. And so I started creatively logging my food in that little calorie counter. And that made me feel better. I was getting to eat what I wanted, but I was staying within my calories. Okay, you see where I'm going with this. Do you think that I lost weight in those first couple of weeks? No, ma'am, I did not lose weight in those first couple of weeks. In fact, I might have even gained weight in those first couple of weeks because I was not doing it correctly. And I thought to myself, gosh, I don't understand why this isn't working. I just can't figure this out. And then that little voice in my head started talking to me. The rational one, not the one that wants all the food. So the rational one said, really? You don't know why you're losing weight or you're not losing weight? Come on now. And that's because deep down, I did know the truth. I wasn't being honest. I was deceiving myself about it, and it wasn't getting me anywhere. So I know that sounds really basic, but that experience really taught me something. If we want real change, we have to face the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. So we can't live in a make-believe world and expect real results. The make-believe one might be fun. I might get to eat all kinds of things in that make-believe world, but I was never going to make the changes that I needed to make in that world. So the best thing that I could do for myself was to be truly honest about my calories. And if you really love someone and you want the best for them, we tell them the truth, right? That includes ourselves, our friends, our families. In fact, I would say you're really not loving somebody well if you're not telling them the truth. So today, because we're all friends and I care about you, I'm going to tell you the truth. And we're going to get our truth straight from the only one who is the truth himself, and that's God and his word. In John 14:6, we see Jesus says, I'm sorry, that's hard to see a little bit, but Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And then in the Old Testament in Numbers, it says, God is not a man that he would lie, nor a son of man that he would change his mind. And then in Hebrews, it tells us, it is impossible for God to lie. So we're going to get our truth from God's word because he doesn't lie to us. He cannot lie. It's not who he is. And we might not love the truth sometimes. It might be kind of hard to hear. But it's going to be so worth it so that we can see where we are today and how we need to change. And I promise you, I will be truthful I will be loving when I tell you the truth. I will do it in a loving way. So that's foundation number 1. Knowing the truth is essential for change. Foundation number 2 is the weight of our words. You've all heard that saying, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words can never hurt us. That is the biggest pack of lies I have ever heard, right? Has anybody in here ever been hurt by anybody's words? Put them up. Every single one of us have been hurt by somebody's words at some point. That's because words can and do absolutely hurt. And what we say to ourselves and others carries weight. It carries a lot of weight. And if what we say has that kind of an impact, can we all agree that we need to be paying attention to that? We need to be paying attention to the words that come out of our mouth. So let me read to you what the Bible says about the weight of our words. In Proverbs, it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. And then in James is talking about the tongue, and he says, the tongue is the small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Remember when I said none of us have this figured out? This is why. The Bible tells us we don't have it figured out. It says there is no man that can tame the tongue. Now, that does not give us a license to just go and say whatever we want to say. Because, we can't tame the tongue, so I'm just going to let it rip. Nope, that's not what the Bible means here. The Bible means you can't do it, but you need God's help to do it. So ask the Lord for strength and help to be able to tame your tongue. But that's foundation number 2. Our words carry weight and have impact, and they have the power of life and death. So now, we've got our 2 foundations laid, and we're going to build on it. We're going to look at 4 different aspects of gossip. We're going to look at what gossip is and define it. We're going to look at the heart motivations behind gossip, the destructive impact of gossip, and how we can change. So, what is gossip? And I think we have to ask this question because it can be defined in lots of different ways, especially today. In fact, gossip is described in more neutral tones these days, and sometimes even positively. Here's what one researcher said about her findings on gossip. She says gossip is often seen as exclusively self-serving behavior aimed at manipulating others and influencing them in some malicious way. Recent reviews, however, argue for a more positive view on gossip, claiming that gossip is purposeful and important to social functioning. Interesting. Okay, and then I found some recent headlines on gossip. The surprising benefits of gossip. Why gossiping could be good for you, according to the experts. And all the reasons gossiping can actually be good for your health. Okay, so this is why we need to define gossip, because here's what I think has happened. Through the years, we have given gossip cute little names. We've dressed it up in cute little clothes. We've made it out to be a cute little thing that we do as friends. We say things, as Merle said earlier, we call it spilling the tea, and we might ask, what's the buzz? Or we meet to dish the dirt. We lower our voices and we maybe start giggling at what's being said. And I think when we're doing that, we do understand it's not the best thing that we could be doing. It's kind of harmless, right? You know, this is just a fun little thing we're doing with friends. It's on our list of acceptable sins. So I've got a little stuffed animal here. Has anybody seen these before? I know it's kind of hard to see. It's a little stuffed animal. And looks cute, but let me tell you, I was traumatized the first time my niece stuck this little thing in my face. And I'm going to tell you why. Because she acted like it was this cute little stuffy. You know, it is cute, right? Its eyes even look innocent. It's just so adorable. And then she squeezed it like this. And it became vicious. And I was terrified. I was like, there's something not right here. And I kept looking at it and squeezing it. And I would squeeze it over and over and over again. And I'm like, why is this so disturbing every single time I do this? You know, because it is disturbing. Because it's supposed to be cute. It's supposed to be harmless, but it's not. And so when I was thinking about gossip, that's the little animal I thought of. Because we treat gossip like it's harmless, but man, is it hiding some sharp teeth that do damage. So, I'm going to take a little drink. We need to be clear about what gossip is and what it isn't. Because so often those lines can get blurred, especially these days. When we looked at those headlines, what they did is they started mixing positive definitions in with the negative ones and still calling it gossip. So that started convoluting the truth. And that starts to disarm us. We lower our guard. We think, oh, that's not such a big deal. I thought it was a big deal, but maybe it's not. So to understand gossip correctly, we need to define it biblically. And as Merle said, the Bible talks about gossip a lot. So let's go to our ultimate source of truth and let's see what God says about it. Gossip's mentioned throughout Scripture in the Old Testament and the New Testament. There are nearly 40 verses that mention gossip or the words related to it. Every single time it's mentioned, whether it was Old or New Testament, every single time, without fail, it is in a negative context. Always negative. There is never one time the Bible mentions gossip as a positive or even a neutral type of thing. It's always condemned. So, if we're building a definition of gossip, one adjective we can collect for that is negative. Now, let's look at some key verses that are going to help us continue building our definition. A gossip betrays a confidence. Whoever secretly slanders his neighbor. A slanderer separates close friends. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander. Without gossip, conflict ceases. And they have become filled with every kind of wickedness. They are gossips and slanderers. So we're starting to see some words now from the Bible that describe gossip. Untrustworthy, operates in secret, divides friends, hateful and deceitful, stirs up conflict, wicked, and even enjoyable. That verse up there that says gossip is like a choice morsel, that means we like it. Like, It's something we enjoy. It's kind of delicious to us. And that's kind of disturbing, isn't it? And we start to see the framework of gossip in these verses that we've just looked at. There's always the action of gossip, the characteristics and motives of the gossiper, and the consequences of gossip. So pulling from these verses, my way of explaining gossip is speaking evil about someone who isn't present in a way that damages their reputation, disrupts relationships, or serves to elevate the speaker. I also like how one pastor defined this as well. He said, the sin of gossip is bearing bad news behind someone's back out of a bad heart. Very simple. So when we all talk about gossip today, these are the definitions that we're going to use, because biblically, this is what gossip is. And it's the difference between these things is really a heart motive. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But it's just as important to talk about what gossip isn't, because this is where things, again, can get blurry for us. So the Bible defines it as negative. So that's how we're going to look at it, and we're going to clear up what it is not. So here's what gossip isn't. Seeking counsel. If you are discussing a difficult relationship or situation with a wise and trusted person to find a solution, that's not gossip. The Bible calls that seeking wise counsel. Another thing is warning others about danger. Sharing information to protect others from a genuinely dangerous or deceitful person. Now, we see this actually played out in the Bible in 2 Timothy when Paul is warning Timothy in the Ephesian church of Alexander, who is deliberately working amongst the believers, trying to stir up some dissension and conflict and actually seeking to do them harm. So Paul takes a moment to actually warn them about this man. Gossip is not building others up. Sharing positive news or words of encouragement and grace, that's the opposite of gossip. That's actually the thing that believers are encouraged to do for one another in the Bible. And then the last thing here is just sharing knowledge. So sharing general information with permission, that's maybe public knowledge, or that is news that is yours to share. That's not considered gossip either. All of these things we just saw, they're good and right things, and they're permissible. So we don't want to get them mixed up. And like I said, the key definition here between the positive and the negative definitions is that in biblical gossip, it stems from a bad heart that is seeking to spread bad news. And legitimate communication about others is motivated by love and a desire to build up, protect, or restore somebody. So we need to keep those positive things very separate from the negative ones. All right, so we're going to look at now, how do we recognize gossip? And so we're going to see how the Bible talks about it. So there's two major types of gossip in the Bible. One is slandering, and the other is whispering. Slandering is overtly spreading false information intended to harm others and for personal gain. Whispering is secretive. It's using stealth, discretion, or quiet methods to spread the word. Slandering, so you've got one that is just blatant. Slander is blatant. You don't care who knows that you're doing it, you're running around doing it, but the thing you're doing is actually telling lies about somebody else. When you're whispering, you're operating under the radar. You don't really want people to know it's coming from you. You're working under the radar to do hidden damage. And those are the two types that the Bible mentions very consistently in the Old Testament and New Testament. Now, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Greek. And as you probably know, these ancient languages had really much more descriptive words than we do in English. So what we would call gossip is described with words that have a much richer meaning for that term. And that's how we can see today. Like when your Bible says gossip, these are the words that are underneath of it, giving us the definitions of what gossip actually is. That's how we know these two types of gossip. So one specific word I want to point out for us today is in the New Testament in the Greek, It's used specifically for a person who slanders. Okay, so it's a noun. It's for a person. And that word is diabolos. Anybody have any idea what's underneath this word? Diabolos. What I hear? Devil. Yes, that's exactly right. This is the root word for devil. And I'm going to tell you why. Because slander is specifically lying about someone. It's committing deliberate character assassination against them with a malicious heart. And you know what? Satan is called the father of lies. He is called the accuser of the brothers and sisters. So, in the New Testament, slander was taken so seriously that if you were a person doing it, this is what you're called. You're given the same name as the devil. And the reason why is because you are literally mirroring the devil's own character by doing it. So it's pretty serious. That's how scary it is to be overtly, blatantly going around slandering somebody. Now, perhaps most of us in this room are not in that camp. Perhaps most of us are not blatantly setting out to do other people's harm, and that's not our intention at all. But let me ask you guys a question, and this is participatory. Why do we gossip? What are some of the reasons you can think of? Say it out. Okay, to make ourselves look bigger. I heard that. Better. Anybody? In anger. What are some other? That here? Say it again. Okay, in hurt. Yeah, you guys are too good. You guys are mentioning all the heart reasons behind gossip. A lot of times people gossip to bond over friendships too. This is just something we do together. Sometimes we do it just for pure entertainment value. It's fun. It's kind of embarrassing to say that it's fun, but that is kind of the sentiment behind it sometimes. And so we need to take a closer look at what's driving them. And some of you actually already just mentioned that. So I think of it kind of like an iceberg, because what you can see at the surface of our lives are words, actions, and behaviors. But those are being driven by other hidden things that are below the surface. Things like our beliefs, our values, our thinking, our emotions, our heart motivations, and our desires. And it's these things that produce the things that are seen at the surface level. Many times gossiping is driven by our own self-interest without thinking of the good or the well-being of another person. So we're going to focus here on the heart, because we're going to see that no matter what we think our intentions might be, we might think they are harmless or innocent, but what we're going to see is that any time we gossip, it will never come from a good or a well-intentioned heart. And it's important for us to recognize and acknowledge the role that our hearts play in producing our actions. In fact, our words and actions actually reveal what is in our heart, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And the Bible tells us this. So this is Jesus speaking in Matthew, and he says, "For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him." In Mark it says, this is Jesus talking again, "For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person." We look at Proverbs and it gives us a warning. It says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." And here's the truth about how sin works. James tells us that each person is tempted by their own evil desires. Of course, those evil desires are born within our hearts. And after we've entertained those desires, we act on it. And when we act, that's when it becomes sin. So the heart is where these wrong desires begin, because the heart is the center of who we are. And for those of us that belong to Jesus, his spirit lives inside of us, right? But gossip doesn't come from the spirit. It's actually completely incompatible with him. So let's go back to James chapter 3, where it's going to continue to tell us about the tongue. And James says, with the tongue we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in God's likeness. Blessing and cursing come out of the same mouth. My brothers and sisters, these things should not be this way. Does a spring pour out sweet and bitter water from the same opening? No, of course it doesn't. Now, this part is tough. What we're going to start talking about is kind of tough because this is where the truth starts to make us bristle a little bit. Because for gossip to come out, there have to be wrong attitudes hiding in the heart, and none of them reflect the fruit of the Spirit. But here's what we need to remember. God loves us. He wants the best for us. If you're a parent in here, you get this, right? You tell your kids the truth because you love them. Not to make them feel bad, but you want to protect them. And that's what God does with us. So just like I needed to see my real calorie count in order to make any kind of real change, we do need to see the truth about our hearts so that we can guard them. It's not so that we can feel condemned. It's so that we can be set free to do the right things. So let's take a look at what might be hiding in our hearts when gossip starts to come out. And we're going to look at 6 different kinds of hearts. The first one is a malicious heart. Now, this is a heart that intends harm. It is motivated by hatred or bitterness. God calls a person like this spiteful, cruel, and destructive. Our next heart that produces gossip is a deceptive heart. So this is a heart that lies and manipulates. It's a desire to control is what motivates it. And God calls this person, first of all, a liar. And then other words he uses are a flatterer, double-hearted, and someone who stirs up strife and conflict. Our next heart is an envious heart. This is a heart that is discontent and probably has some insecurity in it as well. It's motivated specifically by a desire to have what others have. And God calls a person like this covetous, resentful, and divisive. And the next heart is an unforgiving heart. This is an angry, hurt, wounded, maybe offended heart that over time starts to harden up. And it's motivated by a lot of times a desire to protect ourselves. But God calls a person like this bitter, resentful, and unmerciful. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes because it's hard to think that, you know, when I've been hurt and I harden my heart to protect myself, that like I have all of these things going on for me, bitterness, resentfulness, unmercifulness. But this is what God says. If we're harboring unforgiveness in our hearts, these are the things that are there. The next heart is a prideful heart. Now, this heart is full of self-importance. It's full of itself. It's motivated by a desire to elevate oneself. And God calls a person like this arrogant, boastful, and self-seeking. And our last heart on the list is a careless heart. This is just an undisciplined and maybe a thoughtless heart. It's motivated by sometimes just a general lack of purpose and understanding and what your words can do to others. This is a person who typically just isn't very reflective on the words that they're saying. They don't really think about how it's going to affect somebody else. So God calls a person like this foolish, idle, meddling in other people's business, a busybody, and someone that just has a general lack of self-control. So you can start to see how seriously God takes gossip and what he says about it, and that can feel pretty sobering. And I know that some of you in here might be thinking, well, what I do cannot be all that bad. What I'm doing is just not that evil. It seems harmless. But I think the picture starts to change when we turn the tables and we see what gossip actually does to relationships, to families, to churches, and just to other individual lives. Then we can start to understand why something that might seem so small to us and harmless to us really is seen as evil to God. Gossip destroys trust. It divides relationships. It damages reputations, and it defiles our own hearts. Gossip isn't just talk. It can do lasting damage and sometimes permanent damage. Sometimes that damage can never be undone. And so once you say something out loud to somebody else, kind of think of it like cutting open a feather pillow on a windy day and then trying to collect all the feathers again. So if your words are like the feathers and they are just flying in the wind, think of how difficult it would be to collect all those back in. Now, if I tell you to go outside with your feather pillow and slash it open and just let it fly, and then I tell you, I want you to wait an hour before you start to go and collect all those feathers. But you've got to collect all the feathers. Don't leave any feather out. Like, bad things will happen if you don't collect all the feathers. Like, how impossible would that feel to do? Now, what if I said, well, you can't do it until a day later? Or what about a week later? Look how time affects the difficulty. Well, it just becomes impossible to bring back all of those feathers. And that is why the Bible warns us not only of the spiritual damage of gossip, but also the practical and relational effects of gossip. So I think a good way for us to understand this is to look at the ways gossip can play out in real life. So I want you to switch out of reflecting on your own hearts for a moment and instead now put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's being gossiped about. It's probably not that hard, is it? Because I'm sure that we have all been gossiped about sometime in our lives. And do you remember what it felt like when you found out that you were being talked about behind your back? Do you remember what it felt like in your heart? That's the place of empathy that I want us to access when we're thinking about this. So I'm going to read you a couple of situations here, and then we're going to talk about it. Now, I do feel like I need to say, these are totally made up. There are no people or situations or anything that have come from my life or from your church or from my church or anything like that. These are entirely made up, but they are real things that can happen in one way or another. So, after Sunday service, a few church members linger around the coffee table chatting about random topics. The conversation drifts to people who weren't there. Did you notice Sarah hasn't been around much lately? One says. Yeah, I heard she might be having some problems at home, another adds. Somebody else chimes in. That's sad. I really hope her husband's okay. You just never know what goes on behind closed doors. So no one means any harm with this conversation. They think they're just making small talk. They might even sprinkle in a few like, oh, we should really pray for them comments. But the conversation, even though it's casual and vague, starts to spread. And over the next week, snippets of that conversation start getting repeated by others. And each time, it's got slightly more detail or slightly more assumption added to it. And before long, people start to know that Sarah's marriage is in trouble. So why is this gossip? Well, what began as really chit-chat or idle curiosity and vague talk about somebody else's private life has now turned into speculation and rumor. Nobody verified the facts about what they were talking about, and none of them had permission to discuss it. So that chit-chat really didn't serve any helpful purpose, and except it maybe fed some curiosity and maybe it made somebody feel good because they were the one that was informed about everything. Now let's look at some potential consequences of this. So Sarah is going to start to notice people whispering and giving her maybe sympathetic looks at church. She's going to find out that people she thought were friends are spreading false rumors about her marriage. She feels betrayed and humiliated by this. Trust is now broken within the church community. Relationships are damaged. And you know what? Her family may end up feeling too embarrassed to even come back to church again. And so they have to start looking for a new one. And I know that sounds extreme, but friends, it takes less than that kind of a comment for people to leave the church. I can guarantee you that. I've heard too many stories about it. It takes a small seed that the enemy uses to do his worst. That's one of my favorite songs. Okay, our situation number 2. This is a family situation. So I want you to picture a house that's full of family, laughter, and maybe the smell of roast chicken. It's Sunday dinner time, and conversation with the family starts drifting from weekend plans to family updates. So then between bites, Aunt Linda says with a little smile, "Has anybody heard from Chloe lately? I saw on Facebook she bought another designer bag. I just hope she's not getting herself into debt again." Well, her sister joins in, chuckling. "You know how Chloe is. She could never resist spending money she doesn't have. Maybe she'll learn one day." Well, then the talk starts to snowball, and everyone's got a story about it. Maybe how Chloe once borrowed money, how she's always trying to keep up appearances, and the tone, because it's family, stays light. It may even sound affectionate towards Chloe, but those words just kind of hang in the air because they're really negative, aren't they? Well, a few days later, Chloe's younger cousin, who is totally unaware of the impact of any of this, mentions the conversation to her in passing. And she says, "Well, they were just talking about you at dinner. Nothing bad, they just worry that you're spending too much." Well, Chloe tries to smile about that and think it's no big deal, but she starts to feel upset. The people that she trusted the most, her family, have now turned her into a dinner topic. She wasn't there to explain, and now she wonders what else they might say when she's not around. That's fair, isn't it? Okay, so why is this gossip? Well, because it's family, the conversation wasn't meant to be cruel, but it did cross the line between care and curiosity about somebody. They discussed private matters, they made judgments about Chloe's life, and they used concern as a cover for criticism. So some potential consequences of this. Well, Chloe obviously feels hurt, embarrassed, and betrayed. And trust and closeness with her family has now been damaged. She maybe starts dreading family gatherings, and maybe she begins to even stop coming to them altogether. And then what happens if something hard happens in her life? What if she doesn't have the support she needs during that time? Again, that might sound extreme, but that happens. And there's another consequence that is kind of at play here, and that's what's happening in Aunt Linda's heart. Remember, we said gossip actually defiles the person who gossips their own heart. And so maybe she's been envious and it's grown into bitterness. Maybe she's just judging Chloe's choices to make herself feel a little bit better about herself. But either way, every comment she makes is poisoning her own heart. And over time, that starts to erode her compassion. It erodes her empathy. It hardens her, and it might keep her from being able to show grace to other people. It might even stop her from being somebody who could truly love Chloe and help her when she needs it. So again, I know it sounds extreme, but this is the process. This is how it happens. Because the consequences of gossip are usually deeper and more far-reaching than we could ever imagine. And God knows this. It's why he's telling us about it in his word. It's so that we can stay far away from it and keep us from bringing destruction into our own lives and in the lives of others. Okay, so we've looked at what gossip is and how to recognize it. We know how God views it and how destructive it is. And we know it reveals some not so great things that are in our hearts. So, what do we do about it? How can we rid ourselves of the motivations, thoughts, and practice of gossip? Well, the first step is we have to agree with God that gossip is sin. If we don't see it as a problem, we won't see a need to change it. I'm going to grab my little animal here again. If we see gossip like the cute little version of this animal, we're never going to do anything about it. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to, when you stop and pause and think about what you're going to say, I want you to remember the teeth, okay? Don't remember how cute its little eyes are because it's a scam. Remember his teeth. This is the way God sees gossip. Remember those teeth. And then we have to learn how to recognize it. And so we've done a little bit of that today, but we've got to be aware of the signs that are in ourselves and the signs that come up when we're in conversations with others as well. So signs that gossip is imminent, okay? If voices drop, if eyes are glancing around first to see who is watching before someone starts talking, if it's negative, critical, or judgmental, if the comment is whispered to spark your curiosity and like draw you into it, it's probably gossip, okay? Your antennas should be wiggling all around at this point. These are big red flags. These are good signs for you to know that, hey, I think we are heading into the line here of gossip. All right, so our third step is we just have to refuse to do it. That's what it boils down to. We want to commit to the Lord and to yourself that you're just not going to engage in or listen to gossip for any reason. You just have to draw a line in the sand. And then the next thing on our list, we need to make an escape plan. We got to plan ahead so that we don't make a wrong decision in the moment. That can happen, can't it? So, for when you're tempted to gossip, if you can recognize it before you do it, I want you to stop and pause. And then ask yourself some really good questions. You can ask yourself, what's my motivation for sharing this? Really? Not like the surface level reasons, but the big, ugly, under the iceberg reasons that are driving you for sharing that. You can ask, is what I'm about to say true, encouraging, and edifying to others? Is it about someone who's not here? And if so, do I have permission to speak about them on their behalf? Now, these last two, personally for me, are the ones that do it for me. If the person were here, would I still say what I'm about to say in the way I'm about to say it? And how might the person feel if they knew that I had said this about them? That one will do it for me almost every single time because I don't want that other person to feel bad. So you got to pick the ones that are going to get you to the right decision as fast as you possibly can. All right, if you have already slipped into gossip, if you're in a conversation, you've already kind of slipped into it. You want to stop and make it right immediately, especially if the truth was uncertain. So you need to say something as simple as, like, look, I'm sorry, I have misspoken. Let me retract what I just said there. And don't be persuaded to continue after you say that, because the nature of gossip is that when you start to say something, somebody else is going to go, no. You started that. You're going to have to finish it now. Or they might say something like, well, you can trust me. I promise you I will not divulge this to anybody else. I won't do that. But the fact is, what you have to remember is that it's not about how trustworthy the person is that you are talking to. That person might be completely trustworthy. But it's about the person's trust that you're about to betray when speaking to this person. That's what it's about. When others begin to gossip, number one, don't take the bait. People who gossip are seeking a reaction or are seeking for you to join into their negativity. So just don't react or join in. And in Proverbs, it tells us that anyone that associates with a gossip, or that we shouldn't, as believers, associate with a gossip because they are untrustworthy. So it's not about, you can't listen to gossip and it not be a sin either. So you might say something, if someone starts whispering about a friend's struggles, you might say, I really don't know the full story, so I'd just rather not discuss it. It's as simple as that. The second thing you can do, you can excuse yourself from the conversation. So there may be times where you are just not going to be able to influence that conversation because the people there are just determined to gossip. And so in this case, you will need to walk away. But the other thing I want to say about that is, before you walk away, if you're able to speak up for the person that's not present, do that. Speak up on their behalf. We as believers are called to be a voice for people who don't have a voice. And that includes situations like this. It's as easy as saying something like, I just don't think it's fair for us to talk about her when she's not here. You can also redirect the conversation. You can shift to a completely different topic, or you can just start veering that conversation off to a more positive tone. So for instance, if someone comes to you and says, hey, did you see what she was wearing today? You might say, you know what, I didn't really notice that, but I loved what she said about A, B, and C. That was something new for me. That was so insightful for me. All of a sudden, that conversation has taken a turn in a very right direction, and you have been the conduit for that. Okay, that is something that we are called to do as believers. The last thing we can do is we can address it with the person very gently with love. And you're going to have to use discernment on this one, because this one is mostly for when you have a relationship with somebody already and you notice that maybe they're in a pattern of this, and maybe they're harming themselves or harming others, and so you want to just have a heart-to-heart with them. Talk to them about the harm of gossip and what is really at the heart of it. Kind of like what we're doing today, just not 45 minutes long. I'm almost done, I promise. I read something really insightful recently about how we tackle sin like this in our lives. So often, we know we need to stop doing something, and we really want to stop doing that thing. So we try really hard to stop. And sometimes that works, at least for a while, and then other times it doesn't. And we don't know why. We think, I am trying so hard, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I just can't seem to defeat this sin. And it's discouraging, isn't it? Like, we may even give up trying on it altogether because it's difficult sometimes. Well, here's what one pastor says about defeating sin. He says, sin is not fundamentally defeated through the power of self-denial, but through the power of a greater desire. Self-denial is, of course, necessary, but self-denial is only possible, certainly for the long term, when it is fueled by a desire for a greater joy than what we are denying. And then another pastor puts it this way: a greater affection, a genuine affection for God that is rooted in a relationship with Christ, drives out lesser affections. I just love this way of tackling sin. It completely turned upside down the way that I was viewing things. I am a very rigid, black and white, check the box, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and then this will happen. I'm that kind of a person. But you know what? Until you shift your heart, like what we've been talking about, so that it's only looking at Jesus, it's cultivating a relationship with him, suddenly your heart begins to fill up with Jesus, and there's just no room for this other stuff. So I'm still working on that. And I'm wondering, how are you guys doing with it? Are you working on that? Is this something that you're doing in your walk with Christ? So we want to choose our truth. We want to guard our words. And ultimately, we want to let the love of Christ transform our hearts. And that's so that gossip just has no place in our lives anymore.